Hello, folks. Bill and Brian with Energy Rogue. How you guys doing? Hey, listen. Today we're going to talk about something that we don't necessarily get to too very much because we're going to the end of the value chain almost for oil and gas. We're going to talk about the diesel divergence. Now, I know what you're thinking. No, we're not talking about Fast and Furious. We're not talking about Vin Diesel. We are talking about diesel that comes out of refineries. So, what has been the problem lately? We've been seeing a lot of crude oil come on. And our biggest problem is the crude oil is a light crude. So when we mean light crude, we usually go with an API gravity of in excess of 40 to 44. I mean, that is a refiner will look at a 44 as a light crude. Now, in the field, a lot of times we think that's a lot heavier than it is, but it's a light crude. The problem with light crude, it doesn't give you the diesel that you need when you go through the processes right now that we go through. So that's what we're talking about. It's a mismatch between light crude oil supply and what you need to get out of it. And what we're talking about today is diesel. So what happens when you start refining this is that you start getting a lot of, and this is my favorite word to mispronounce,
Okay.
naphtha. Naphtha. Feels like I have a speech impediment.
I feel
So
like taking
basically,
I feel like taking a nap. It's
yeah,
afternoon. Why not?
yeah.
Why not, right?
It's like naphtha time. So, so, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But we're talking about that when you start blending this, this is the one place where the solution to pollution is not lution. What this means is that you start having an impact what's going on. So Brian, show us what that yield deficit looks like on the light versus heavy crude.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about is kind of the diesel divergence. So when people talk about crude oil and crude oil demand, crude oil's demand is only into a refinery. The actual demand is on the other side of the refinery, including gasoline, diesel, or distillates. Distillates, diesel being one portion of that. Jet fuel, bunker fuel, other oils. The heavier oils are the motor motor oil, which requires extra processing, asphalt. That's actually the demand. And what's happening, and what we've realized as part of our analysis, is that over the last 15 years, the composition of heavy crude, which is denser and it has a lower number on the API, versus lighter crude has been shifting, and it's been shifting more light. And the reason why is because of US shale. And light yields, the reason this matters is because the light yields 25% less diesel. So what that means is we're going to have a lot of gasoline, we're going to have a lot of naphtha, but we're not going to have a lot of diesel. So it creates high gasoline and petrochemical yields, but low distillates. And distillates are an aggregate of fuel that, pardon me, fuel that's needed out there. So blending comes into play and a lot of things. So the composition in 20 years ago, I think 20% of the global supply was light crude. It's now closer to 40 to 50%. So refiners are really shifting. And what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about this and what it means for diesel markets, what it means for gasoline markets, as well as crude oil markets, because it's going to impact all of it. So this is a chart. The dark green shows light shale. The teal color shows a medium sour, meaning light shale. You're going to get more naphtha, but less diesel. Look at that, and less gas oils. So you're going to get more of this naphtha, which is going to be kind of a lighter blend stock. And a lot of people say, well, what is naphtha used for? It's used for blending into crudes like Venezuelan crude or Canadian crude, right, Bill?
That's right. In fact, as you use this, something like Venezuela is a very good example because they can't move their crude unless they blend it with naphtha because the gravity is so low. Now, what that means though is that gravity that low means it has a lot more of the actual fuel gas or fuel oil in it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that makes it very easy. it's easier to refine, but when you're moving crude oil, it just takes a lot of heat when you got low gravity crude oil.
And so, so this is often what we talk about on the dumbbell dilemma, which
So,
oh,
Brian, I'm going to ask you for the first time ever, do a drawing of a dumbbell.
all right. And what does that mean? That looks like a nuclear reactor. It
I
could
was going
be.
to say, yeah, I would have drawn it sideways, but okay. But that means the heavies, there's a lot more lights and there's a lot more heavies, and in the middle it's thin. But in the middle is where you get your like diesel and gasoline. So when you're looking at a molecule of crude oil, that's why it's called the dumbbell barrel because it looks like a dumbbell that you work out with, not because it's
Right.
stupid.
Yeah. Well, what this means is in the result of today, it ends up with 25% more light-ins, which means naphtha gasoline markets are more likely, holding demand equal, which we all know it's not equal, into an oversupply range. Whereas 30% of distillates, diesel jet fuel, end up undersupplied. And that's going to be very important for the future ahead because 70% of the US capacity for refining, which is one of the largest in the world, so one of the largest countries of refining in the world, is built for heavy sour crude. And the composition of the US shale production is that light end. And this is the reason that we export 4 million barrels a day of crude and import 6. So you can look at it and say, well, we're net importing too. No, we're getting rid of the stuff that is not suited for our refineries and importing the stuff that is suited for our refineries. So
Yeah,
Gulf
we're
Coast,
shipping the
oh,
light
go ahead.
ends to more modern refineries.
Hmm,
We're shipping the light ends to more modern refineries. Realize that the reason 70% of our capacity is built for heavy sour is because all of our capacity was built back in the 70s. That's where the expanded capacity was. The actual refineries were built over 100 years ago when all we
that
had
is
was heavy.
crazy. 100 years ago? I mean, that
What?
is just begging in an industry that has invested in a lot of infrastructure over the years and a lot of massive upstream infrastructure. It seems like the downstream infrastructure, and we're going to get to that in a minute, is prime for some reinvention. So we're gonna be talking about that a little bit later. But Bill, why don't you give us a history lesson? Tell us a little bit about the missing heavy barrels. Where did they go? Are they truly missing?
I love the fact that when we go to talking about history, we start with the late 1990s. I love it. That's when Brian and I met. So so what you're talking about in the missing heavy barrels is that everyone knows about the decline,
Hmm.
and we've produced in the easy places to get out. Crude oil heavy crude oil is not the most inexpensive thing to pull out, so it takes a lot of that. Also, back then, Venezuela was pushing out 2 million barrels a day in the 1990s. Last year, it was 135,000 a day. So it's a significant decline. And we've shown this many, many times that a million barrels a day in the crude oil market today is significant.
That
Back
moves
then,
global markets. That doesn't just move US markets.
right.
That moves global markets.
And in the 1990s, 2 million barrels a day was even more impactful.
Hmm.
So what it is that we could absorb right now a million barrels a day of additional heavy crude, and and so our two places that we get it from is Venezuela and Canada. Now realize we used to get it from the Middle East, but
Hmm.
Venezuela and Canada made it a more financially attractive offer to get it from that close than to bring it all the way from the Middle East. And so
Right.
the potential right now is that we need to increase our imports from Canada or from Venezuela. Now, with the fact that we have more naphtha, we can ship that to Venezuela to keep it moving.
Yeah. That is definitely true. So diesel, and a lot of people think about it and they think of diesel cars or diesel trucks, diesel pickup trucks. But diesel is really, I view it as an indicator of the economy because freight, logistics, construction, mining, agriculture, manufacturing, that is the big industrial complex, and that a lack of diesel demand indicates that freight and logistics is down, meaning shipments are down. Construction and mining is down, meaning economic output is down. Agriculture is down. Well, we're not going to talk about food today, but that's a very dangerous one. And manufacturing, industrial generators, backup power, and things like that. This is really the institutional economy behind consumer economy. Consumer economy, if we buy some iPhones, okay, well, consumer prices went up or down because iPhones are more expensive. Freight, logistics, people buying things on Amazon, people shipping things on long haul products that are shipped, construction and mining. And
Uh,
when we look at this, we look at this chart all the time inside of our platform. This is distillate inventory tightness over the last year and a half. And what you can see is that we were setting new minimums or new lows. The white line is where we
right.
are. And we've gotten back up to quote unquote average, the 5 year average. Bill and I will go on a rant on that some other day about what average, what does that mean? What does average really mean? Does that mean anything? It means
Yeah,
something
just
relative
remember,
to 5 data points, right?
we always consider a C grade an average grade, and none of us ever like getting C grades except for
Did you
me because
did you get
that was
my
a given.
transcript or something? I don't
Yeah, I was
know.
going to say, but
Oh.
and listen, folks, the way to look at diesel is the fact that everything we have, everything in your house, everything that you consume, is either grown or mined.
Mm,
It's either
hmm.
grown or mined, and you cannot do that without diesel.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I told you I wasn't going to go into agriculture, but if all crude oil stopped today and all diesel shipments stopped today, agriculture would drop precipitously. I saw one figure that said up to a third of the world's food supply would be unable to be captured, transported, or brought to market because of diesel. So if diesel was out of the equation, now there's a lot of technological advancements which we're going to get to a little bit later, but the cost of light crude. What does this mean? So we've gotten lighter. We used to have a heavier mix in our concentration. Well, what happens in the U.S. is refiner margins erode, crack spreads are tightening, and global competition for these newer refineries that Bill was talking about in Asia, they can capture this much easier because they're leveraging off of newer technology, newer infrastructure. And that's a key component, especially in the United States. And
They're also getting recruited from the Middle East as well.
yeah, and so they get the middle, they get that medium sour. Here's an option: could upgrade infrastructure on their crackers. It sounds easy to say that. We're talking a multi-year construction timelines, and by multi-year, we're usually talking 5 to 10. And regulatory permitting, skilled workforce shortages, uncertain ROI if crude slates shift again. I mean, bear in mind, our crude slate over the last 15 years has shifted dramatically. Is it going to shift again?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will. So what do these investments look like? What is the technology that we're going to do? So here's 3 potential endpoints. Where do we go from here? This is 3 potential endpoints. One is a pivot to heavy oil recovery. In other words, instead of economics going to the Permian to drill more light shale, that some of that economics in the broader space, in the broader scheme of things, gets pivoted to Venezuela, Canada, more resources going to that because heavy oil is going to be priced higher and priced more valuable. It used to be priced less than light oil. Now it's priced more than light oil. And that's because of this dynamic of light oil being very, very well supplied and heavy oil being less supplied on a percentage scale. So that's one angle. Another angle is refinery retooling, which is going to be capital intensive. It's going to take a long time, a lot of permitting, and hydrocracker investments. And that's going to result, or the third potential endpoint is demand destruction, like through battery electrification, like battery cars. And this is going to erode diesel consumption. This one, if you read some analysts, they expect this within 24 months. I call me negative Nelly, but it's going to take over 15 years to displace even a portion of it. You can think about it this way: wind and solar on natural gas power, displacing natural gas as a power source, have been phenomenal growth over the last 10 years or the last 15 years. Phenomenal growth. Like we have never seen an energy transition this fast. It still accounts for less than 10% of the market. This is going to take a long time to make a dent. So those are three potential endpoints. Um, so let's talk about each one. What do you think about the heavy oil recovery, Bill?
Well, it's going to. This one probably has the most impact from geopolitics,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're not going to grow it. We're not going to grow that heavy oil here in the U.S. We're not going to grow the production, at least not yet. It's not high enough to do that. So we're going to have to get it from overseas, and so or Canada, and so that's what's got to happen. And we got to get we got to release some sanctions. Probably Venezuela. We'll see. They haven't proven to be on the long term being able to actually stabilize their economy and their nation.
Right.
But if they don't, it won't matter. So I think that Venezuela is the Canadians the easiest, Venezuela's second. Then after that, we got to count on the Middle East.
Yeah. All right, let's look at scenario number two, refinery retooling. Um, scenario number retooling. That's what I'll call it. Retooling. So this is a capital intensive path. If heavy supply remains constrained, refiners build hydroprocessing capacity. This is going to take a lot of capital. I mean, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars,
Yes,
hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions,
and
if we're looking
that's
at the
going into
global.
100-year-old facilities.
Yes. So there's significant barriers to cost, time, regulatory, and risk of stranded assets if the market conditions shift. And this is where we're going to come back to this. Technology is going to be key. Scenario three, demand destruction and efficiency. Well, I gave you my opinion on it being a lot longer on the EV side of the equation. What are your thoughts there, Bill?
We also haven't looked at the unintended consequences that happen when we start changing this in a rapid way. Because a lot of people talk about, well, we'll just make the trucks electric. Electric trucks are pretty cool. They've got a lot of torque, they got a lot of stuff. However, they've got a 500-mile range. And that sounds like a long way for us, but realize that some of these trucks are moving somewhere 1,000 miles a day with two
Wow,
drivers.
that's a
And at
lot.
500 miles, the electric truck has to stop and it has to recharge for a significant amount of time. On top of that, you add 10,000 pounds to the base weight of the truck.
Is that how
So,
much?
yes. So,
Wow.
yeah, 10,000 pounds. When you add 10,000 pounds, that's 10,000 pounds of freight not moving on that truck
Hmm.
because there are weight restrictions on the roads. But that means also that they're going to be tearing up the roads even more, even running empty.
Which
And
means
so,
you need more asphalt, you need more cement, which require more energy. Right? We
which
can't.
means you more, which means you need more, which means you need more taxes to buy all that. And
Hmm.
where does all that money, where does all that tax money come from right now? It comes from fuel sales. And
Mm.
so if we're not selling fuel, we're selling electricity. How do you pay for those road taxes? So there's a lot of unintended consequences that are just starting to pop their head up. And so we've got a lot of work to do before we get there. I'm telling you, I love the electric motor. I love it on trucks. I love it on that. It's not there yet. We're going to have to come up with some sort of hybrid. But when you
Right.
talk about a hybrid on a diesel truck, and there's actually a company in Canada making a hybrid electric truck, big truck,
Oh, wow.
and they're awesome, but they can't get past the Canadian regulations. They've literally been shut down because of regulations.
Wow.
Because we don't, you know how it is. It's, if it moves, you tax it. Uh, no, if it moves, you regulate it. If it doesn't move, you tax it. So
Mm.
that's a way to look at it. So I think it's coming. I don't think it's coming in the next 5 years. I think we're probably 10 years. I agree with you. I think we're 10 years out, but it could be a very interesting growth strategy there.
It's
If we
going to
want
be
to get the
changing
electricity going.
within the 10 years, but just not to the scale that many alarmists
Well,
anticipate.
there's a lot of other issues around it that you got to solve before that.
Right. Right.
It's sort of like when we have flying cars. Everybody says, "Oh, that'd be great." Yeah, it would be, except for now you have people running in weather in the sky and then they fall.
Yeah,
If you run together on the ground, you're on the ground.
absolutely.
So
And this is why strategic considerations like for policymakers, as Bill was
yeah,
mentioning in Canada, evaluate sanction policy. You get into the geopolitics, streamlining permitting for refinery upgrades, supporting infrastructure for alternative fuels. I mean, alternative fuels. Think about it this way: is that as we're bridging into converting to cleaner fuels, there are some reasons to keep some of the inefficient or um, not as beneficial for the environment fuels in the mix because it may be for stability and it may be for economics. My hope is that we move to cleaner and cleaner and cleaner environments. And this is where, for refiners, they're going to assess the crude slate flexibility and their upgrade options. They're going to model capex and all this stuff. This is around infrastructure that's 50 to 100 years old. They're going to hedge their exposures. They're going to do all that. Or, as we have learned firsthand, we work with a company, Green Fuels Operating. They are currently have a patented technology that is both environmental, meaning dramatic reduction in the amount of emissions, and it's cheaper to run. And these can be built today in smaller footprints with less impact to the environment. This is a phenomenal, but the technology leap that we saw in the energy space on the upstream side over the last 15 years, I'm seeing that in the refining side. We're starting to shift old legacy ways of doing things and using technology to extract more of the product that's needed. I mean, this technology can dial in, no, I want diesel. I don't need as much gasoline, so just lump that in naphtha, and then you offload that naphtha. So it's phenomenal, right, Bill?
it's really awesome that, and not only that, it's located near the source of
Yep.
supply, and so now you don't have this. I'm creating oil in this part of the country, where else to be refined. I ship the fuel back. Just that alone is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the global implications? Asia has an advantage with some of the refineries in China and India. These are newer refineries and they're optimized for heavy crude imports because they're right close by the Middle East. So they can get that medium sour barrel pretty easy. Europe has a pretty big exposure because they have large diesel impact there, or diesel dependent countries and economies. And that is going to face some supply vulnerability with this current shift to lighter crudes. Now, OPEC's role It's most of, okay, not all the countries inside of OPEC that are delivering are going to be that medium sour or heavy oil, but a lot of it is. A large concentration is. So that medium sour production remains critical for global balance. And where I would say is, how do we know all this stuff, Bill? How do we even understand when we're talking about this shift from light to heavy? How do we know this stuff?
We look at this every day. Every day, Brian, I've talking about this, and when I mean every day, I mean Saturday and Sundays are not exempt. We're looking at this every day. We're looking at all the. I mean, we have even on our website we have 150 plus charts on all the different commodities and everything. We're constantly reading the news. We're constantly talking to professionals in this area, and why we do all that is so we can bring to you something that you can understand in the Energy Road platform. Now, one of the things we got for you today is that we've got some stuff down below, and Brian's going to talk about that in a second. But what it is fundamentals that we look at all the fundamentals, we look at the hedging and look at the financial markets, and we try to bring that together in one part so that you can understand these three key takeaways. Is one, we got a structural mismatch. You can't just put light oil in a refinery. I refer to this as all barrels are not created equal. That's
Right.
the only thing I can tell you. All barrels
Yep.
are not created equal. We've got to get more heavy crude for the refineries that we have because we can't just magically change refineries. They just
Right.
don't magically change.
Yep.
It's a lot of work and a lot of money. So we need to get back to getting some more heavy crude coming into the U.S. to the refineries that can take it. And then the diesel vulnerability. If you want to know why things keep going up, a lot of times it's because the diesel price is going up or going down. And
Hmm.
so I don't, if you're looking at it and say, hey, listen, my beer costs more this year. Well, maybe because it was delivered by a truck
Right.
that burned diesel and the
Hmm.
diesel price is up. And then, so that's where we talk about all this is this diesel divergence is all about um, delivering things to the house. That's what it boils down to. It
Yeah.
starts a long way away, but eventually it gets to the house.
Yeah. And these things impact your day-to-day life and day-to-day markets for various industries across the board because energy impacts virtually everything economically. And so to understand what is happening in the marketplace, because we cover Energy Rogue, we cover oil markets, refined product markets, natural gas liquid markets, refined product markets, electricity, natural gas, all of those markets we have coverage, and we actually understand supply, demand, imports, exports, storage, all and production capacity, demand capacity, and we study it in the United States and also internationally. And as Bill said, it takes a lot of time. And if you want to understand energy markets in a short amount of time, we do have an ebook down below. It's completely free. So just click a few buttons and you'll be off and running, and you'll have an ebook to understand how you can get to clarity on energy markets very quickly, and in some cases up to 5 minutes a day. So listen, we're Energy Road, Bill and Brian, and we appreciate you listening to us today. But there needs to be a shift and a support of technology because we are in a transition period. And that transition period is going to be impactful for economics. It's going to be impactful for the economics. So as we shift into this technology uh, revolution, a lot of people are talking about AI, but it's not just AI. It's where do we get our energy? Because every day we turn on the lights. Every day, most of us drive in our car. Every day we get a package delivered from Amazon that was delivered by a diesel truck. Or in some cases, there's some hybrids, but those are still in the minority. And in some cases, you book a vacation on your jet fuel. All of it drives on energy, and this impacts day-to-day life, and it impacts not just day-to-day life. I talked about a lot of modern conveniences that are first world privileges in some countries and in some parts of the world. This is about human life existence. So access to energy is actually helping improve lives and allowing people to get agriculture to the right places. Using that diesel to get transportation trucks to get bananas from one side of the country to the other. There's a lot of different examples. I don't know. Bananas? What? I don't know.
Sure,
Something.
bananas. You're always that banana fan. So, folks, reach down below if you want to understand why all barrels are not created equal. Uh, Go to the ebook. Learn that. It's going to get you curious. There's more things you can do. More things we'd like to tell you. The other thing is, if you're listening to this and you're in Houston, so are we. We will be in Houston for NAPE. We'll be there Wednesday and Thursday. If you're at NAPE, man, come by the OGGN podcast booth and reach out for us. And we'd love to sit down and visit with you about the market. So that's what I get. Brian, let's take us home, man, brother.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks for hanging out with us. We set a target of 20 minutes, which meant we went 31. So sorry. But thanks for hanging with us. If you're still here, thanks so much. Make sure you subscribe and like if you want to follow this, and drop us a comment and let us know what you think about this, or if you have topics or suggestions on things you're curious about on energy markets. So,
This would be shorter if you guys would listen faster.
all right. Thanks so much, folks. We'll see you next week.